The world's richest man blowing the lid off of political censorship at Twitter, and it has many in the media mad about that. Elon Musk promising more smoking guns after giving journalist Matt Taibbi a treasure trove of internal company documents concerning the suppression of the Hunter Biden laptop story. Taibbi posting the revelations tweet by tweet, saying tweets were routinely removed at the request of both political parties, but Democrats had the advantage due to political leanings of the Twitter staff. Twitter justified the decision to suppress the laptop story using its hacked materials policy. But that required an official law enforcement finding of a hack, and that never materialized. Taibbi says this led the company to take extraordinary steps to suppress the story, removing links and posting warnings that it may be unsafe. Musk says there's more to come.
Twitter was acting like an arm of the Democratic National Committee. It was absurd. I think there will be more smoking guns because the obvious next question is, well, what happened after the election?
The media not only downplayed it, they also attacked the messenger. Dozens of reporters accusing Matt Taibbi of doing PR work for the richest person in the world, and others in the press doing their best to downplay it.
Putting those things back on the platform, juxtaposition with the argument that he's all about free speech, really undermines some of the central tenets of free speech.
It sort of shows is a real struggle at an important platform for how to deal with something so outrageous, so explosive, and what to actually do with it.
There is a long-running theme through Republican politics right now that big tech has censored conservatives, and that is enough. That is enough to have Republicans say, aha, this is exactly what we have been talking about.
And the White House says the story is not even worth your time.
Twitter was so haphazardly pushed this distraction. That is a full of old news, if you think about it. And at the same time, Twitter is facing very real and very serious questions about the rising volume of anger, hate, and anti-Semitism on their platform, and how they're letting it happen. And, the president said last week, more leaders need to speak out and reject this.
Okay, they had days to plan an answer, and that is not the one I would have thought that they would give. Greg, if a tweet falls in a forest, is the media going to cover it?
No, but it's great. I love a news story that is outside the news control.
Yeah.
It's like releasing it tweet by tweet, and everybody's sitting there like this going, and then they have to pretend like it's not happening, which is what's going on. The real story about that accusation that Musk is doing, Matt Taibbi is doing PR work for Musk. That's not the story. The story is the cut and paste of it all. It was a uniform response of, dozens of blue checkers that said the same thing. He's doing work for Musk. He's doing work. So it was clear. It's something, again, that we always suspected to be true and now is being verified, that there are marching orders. We just don't know where they come from. But there was some tweet. There was a sentence that was sent to all of these people that say he's doing PR for the world's richest man. That showed up everywhere. And that tells you that the media often relied on on imaginary numbers. If you were going to speak up against the media or say something they didn't like, they would create the mob out of a singular message. And that message would be, you better shut up. That in itself is its own form of censorship, to create this mob of like, oh, my God, look, all these people feel the same way. And it also shows you that the media does not come up with the stuff themselves. It's spoon-fed to them by whom? I don't know. Somebody in the DNC. It's just that it's amazing that the media, this is the best part, the media now functions as bots. The NBC disinformation correspondent is a bot. Ben Collins is a bot. The thing that he tweeted was tweeted everywhere else. How hilarious is that the disinformation specialist is himself a disinformation bot? He should call himself out. He might get a promotion.
Miranda Devine also talked about the other source of this, which was that Twitter said that they had to have a hacked materials policy. Okay, so who was helping them decide that they needed to have that? Well, Miranda Devine, she has an idea. Listen to her here.
The FBI had come to Twitter and told them in their weekly meetings before the 2020 election to look out for a hacked materials, a hack and leak operation that they believed was going to be about Hunter Biden, and it was going to come in October. So, of course, when Twitter saw our story in October about Hunter Biden, they censored it immediately.
What's interesting is that so they had this, we talked about the 51 national security folks that signed that letter that said, oh, this is disinformation. Well, that was 5 days after Twitter had already censored it. So they had this already ready to go, Judge.
Well, you know, you have to look at this on a bigger level than just Twitter. There is an attempt to literally get rid of the foundations upon which and the principles upon which this country was founded. Why do we have a First Amendment? We have a First Amendment for freedom of speech and freedom of the press. And yet Michael Steele said in one of those quotes, although he's all about free speech, the so-called Twitter files undermine free speech because they are, if it is free speech occurring at the harm or expense of someone else. Since when do we qualify free speech as being at the harm or expense of someone else? I mean, why do we have defamation laws? If it harms you, sue. And then let me see if I got this right. Everything that we've been talking about since October of 2020, now, according to the White House press secretary, is old news.
Yes.
Okay? And so in 2020, the story was censored. Any discussion was censored. The FBI warns Twitter during weekly meetings there's going to be and you've got to confirm it. Nobody bothered to confirm it. How easy would it have been to confirm that that this laptop was legitimate and that the emails on it were legitimate? They didn't want to. Did it ever occur to them that the reason the Post ran this thing is because they know the defamation laws? They wouldn't have published it, but for the fact that they could show that it was not defamatory. And I got one more thing to say. When it is finally exposed, the left does not deal with the truth. They don't deal with the fact. They call Elon Musk and Mike Taibbi a racist. I mean, and this one's doing the bidding of the richest man on earth. And the New York Times covers it up, and they say, instead of saying this is rank censorship, they come out and say, well, there was an earnest debate on how to deal with unconfirmed news. You, New York Times, of all people, know how to confirm news.
There was a time, Jessica, when journalists might have tipped their hat to Matt Taibbi and said, wow, great scoop. Wow, good job. I wish I would have been able to do that instead. And then you have to chase it, right? And I know that they don't have firsthand look at the materials, but a lot of reporters, I've been involved in many stories where, let's say, the New York Times gets a scoop and everybody else has to report on the scoop and defer to the New York Times and say, as reported by the New York Times, and then they go on with the story. That's a pretty poor excuse.
Listen, I think that we're in a good place that now everybody, liberal, independent, conservative, agrees that the Post story should not have been censored in the first place. But when you look at the timeline of what happened, because I was thinking to myself, everyone's talking about this as if it would have changed the election, right? How close to the election are we talking about? So October 14th, that's when the story comes out. October 16th, it's back online. So 48 hours there. Within the first 8 days of the story being out in the wild, there was an article about it on Facebook that had 54 million views. That's a lot of views. Yeah. It was dominating the discourse. Axios put out a survey saying that the Hunter Biden saga was what was dominating the political scene there. And now we're still in the early voting window even. We're not even close to Election Day. The Jim Comey letter came out 11 days before the election. Think about this, how much more time there is for this. I cannot stand watching conservatives, like Kevin McCarthy was doing it this weekend, soon to be Speaker of the House, talking about how this is about the First Amendment. Joe Biden was not in elected office. He was a candidate. And what his team, according to the Matt Taibbi files, and I think it's in tweet 10 where we're talking about this, what they wanted taken down, the links that he provided, were pictures of his son's penis. Now, you tell me as a parent, their parents at the table, people who've run for office. If God
So
forbid,
it wasn't about the 10% for the big guy.
no, well, it wasn't. Then show me the link about that. But the link that I saw was about Hunter Biden's junk.
Well,
that's
really
pathetic.
not,
No. Yes, really, and that does matter. This is not about the First Amendment. And then he also said,
Don't hide behind his junk.
Yeah.
I don't know how big it is. How could I?
Big
Wait,
guy.
can I just say something, though? Taibbi also admitted that the Trump campaign asked for content moderation,
Yes.
and then he left those links out. Why did he not tell us what the actual government was asking to have taken down when you're telling us what Joe Biden's team asked to be taken down? And by the way, that's a violation of the terms of service. That's not even a favor. That's someone pinging someone at Twitter and saying, hey, this is revenge porn.
I mean,
When
well,
did they
maybe
take
when
Trump
Musk says
off?
there's more to come, maybe
What do
that.
you mean?
Well,
When
let's
did
get
Twitter
Jesse
take
here.
Trump
When he tried to lead an insurrection.
Jesse, please reveal everything that you were going to say at 7 p.m. for us right now instead.
I'm not there yet, but we know that this was not a free and fair election and that votes were hijacked. And the wrong person is in the White House throwing state dinners that I'm not invited to. These state dinners that Biden just had should have been Trump's second-term state dinners that I would have been invited to.
Would you have
Am
been
I
invited?
upset? Absolutely. I was not invited to the
Would you have
Australian
complained?
or French state dinner, but second-term state dinners, there were tickets for me. I'm okay with it. I've recovered, and that's not the point. The point is this. The FBI, the CIA, Twitter, and the media all pushed a lie about the Republican candidate, and they all censored the truth about the Democrat candidate. And they all got caught, Jessica. And do any of them care? No. They'd all do it again. None of them paid the price. The Twitter executives got golden parachutes. The CIA spooks and the FBI guys, they all got jobs in the media. And the media is now saying, please censor us more. What kind of people want
think
less
that-
freedom,
you
Jessica?
think-
Have you
think-
heard these people? They're saying, you know what?
So
we
for-
like censorship. I want to know less about what happened. Now, no one does that. Now, this is actually what happened. They knew the laptop was real, the FBI, because they got it a year before. The little repairman with the beret gave it to him, and he said, here. So they knew it wasn't hacked for a year. Now, how did they know it was about to drop? Because they were spying on Rudy. They were investigating Rudy for the foreign agent case that they never even brought, and they knew he was shopping it. So they had these weekly meetings with Twitter saying that it's going to drop. Hacked stuff from Russia's dropping in October. And then it drops in October from the Post, and these guys said, oh, you know what? Let's use the hacked materials excuse. Boom, it's nuked. And guess what? The same guy who was a lawyer for Twitter,
James
Baker, who killed it at Twitter, also was the one Crooked shopped the dossier to at the FBI. He's on both sides of this crime.
You know,
now,
I
has he
hate
been
it.
asked anything about this? No, he's a hero. He's your hero.
He's not my hero. And
Bow
you know
down
I
to him.
hate it when you call her crooked and not by her actual name.
Hillary
I would
Rodham.
also add that every newsroom, including our own here at Fox News, turned down this story because it was Rudy and Steve Bannon walking around saying, hey, we got the goods on Hunter Biden.
On Saturday night, I remember well. Pirro and Waters were hammering it. Gutfeld was hammering this.
Absolutely.
Well, talk to
This is an
the big guys
example.
upstairs.
I was all over it like a wet T-shirt.
Trying to
Woodward and
influence
Bernstein,
an
Waters
election.
and Pirro.
This is a government trying to influence an election. You've got FBI agents getting everybody ready for when that thing was coming down. They had it for a year. They knew about the 10%, the money, the Ukrainians of Burisma. And you know what? It was systematic suppression of the Biden corruption.
If you
That's
think
what
this
it
would
was.
have changed the
Biden
election,
corruption.
I have many bridges to sell you. Also,
There's a study that proved it.
Yeah.
I'll
I
send it
saw
to you.
that study.
10% would have
Okay.
changed their vote.
Hi, everyone. I'm Brian Kilmeade. I want you to do me a favor. I want you to click to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page. This is the only way that I know for sure that you're not going to miss any great commentary, any great news bites, any great interviews coming your way on Fox. You can get it all here on YouTube. So subscribe right now.